What if I told you that getting exactly what you want is actually the fastest way to become completely miserable?
I mean, it sounds like a total paradox, right?
Totally.
Yeah.
But today, we're doing a deep dive into this, looking at the hidden machinery in your brain, the stuff that practically guarantees you'll never feel like you have, enough.
Right, unless you learn how to actively hack it, which is what we're going to talk about.
Exactly. Because we spend our entire lives chasing these highly specific milestones, right?
Oh, for sure. The promotion, the new relationship, the
Mm.
upgraded phone.
Yeah, and we do it under the assumption that crossing that finish line is going to lock in a permanent state of happiness.
But then we get there and the satisfaction just, well, it evaporates almost immediately.
And that evaporation is what absolutely fascinates me. Like you catch yourself saying, I need a new phone or I need them to text me back right now.
Yeah, you feel it right in your chest.
You really do. It's that absolute, unquestionable certainty of need. But if you take a step back, you're using the language of biological survival to describe something that is completely optional.
Well, the word need carries incredible psychological weight. It actively triggers our threat response system.
Wait, really? Just the word?
Yeah, absolutely. When we use it to describe like an aesthetic preference or a quick burst of social validation, we completely blur the line between what physically and psychologically sustains us and what merely attracts us.
Wow. Okay, so we're basically confusing survival with just wanting something nice.
Exactly. And once that line is gone, you are running on a treadmill with no off switch.
So the mission for this deep dive is to locate that off switch for you. We are looking at the fascinating and honestly pretty messy border between our true needs and our endless desires.
Right. We want to untangle the requirements for actual human thriving from the impulses we've simply been conditioned to chase.
Right. And to do that, we have to start by looking at how our brains actually process comfort.
So the mechanism to really focus on here is called hedonic adaptation.
Hedonic adaptation.
Yeah.
Got it.
Yeah. It is essentially the brain's internal recalibration system.
Okay, how did that work?
Well, from an evolutionary standpoint, human beings had to be remarkably good at adjusting to difficult, hostile circumstances just to stay alive. We adapt to hardship.
Which makes sense. That's a good survival trait.
It is. But the catch is that this mechanism doesn't just turn off when times are good. We adapt to comfort just as ruthlessly.
So it's not like getting into a hot bath where you just get used to the water. It's more like the brain acts like a thermostat.
Yes, that is a perfect way to visualize it.
Right, like you set it to a certain temperature, the room warms up, but eventually that new warmth just feels like the neutral baseline. You don't even notice it anymore until someone opens a window and lets the cold air in.
Exactly. The brain actively works to return your emotional state to a neutral baseline, regardless of how much external luxury or success you introduce into your environment.
So it literally doesn't matter how good things get.
Not to the thermostat, no. When your circumstances improve, your expectations simply dial up to match them. Yesterday's wild, unimaginable luxury becomes today's absolute minimum requirement.
Oh man, I was just thinking about this the other day regarding flying.
Oh, flying is the perfect example.
Right, because if you usually fly economy, it's totally fine. It's the norm. You get from point A to point B, no problem.
Yeah, you don't really think about it.
But then, maybe for a honeymoon or a special occasion, you get bumped up to business class. And you get the legroom, the warm nuts, the actual glass instead of a flimsy plastic cup.
It is glorious.
It's so glorious.
Yeah.
But the next time you walk past those big seats to go back to economy, suddenly your normal seat feels like a medieval torture device.
Yeah, and the economy seat didn't shrink.
Exactly. It's the exact same seat.
But your reference point shifted. The thermostat got reset. And it happens with technology all the time, too. Think about navigation.
Oh, yeah. GPS?
Right. 20 years ago, people navigated cross-country with paper maps, maybe a vague set of directions jotted on a napkin, and just their memory.
Which sounds completely terrifying now.
Because of GPS on our phones. Now, the thought of driving 10 minutes to a new restaurant without turn-by-turn satellite guidance feels impossibly inconvenient.
I mean, I panic if the map app won't load in a parking lot.
Exactly. But the human requirement for navigation didn't change at all. Our expectation of frictionless convenience changed.
And losing that convenience actually feels terrifying. Like we adapt to these comforts so thoroughly that having them taken away registers in our nervous system as an actual threat.
Which leaves us in a highly vulnerable position. In a modern world of relative abundance, this adaptation means our definition of enough is just a constantly moving target.
Okay, so if our brains are these easily reprogrammable thermostats, That explains so much about modern consumer culture.
Oh, absolutely. The world isn't just passively offering us goods anymore.
No, it is actively exploiting that recalibration mechanism to manufacture brand new desires.
Advertising has undergone this radical structural shift in how it targets the human psyche. Historically, a product solved a tangible problem.
Right, like you have a leak in your roof, here's tar to fix it.
Exactly. But today, modern consumerism often introduces you to a psychological problem you didn't even know you had, and then it sells you the cure.
So it's selling the problem and the solution.
Yes. It sells possibilities, identities, and emotions, which are entirely detached from the actual physical utility of the object.
I mean, nobody buys a luxury mechanical watch just to tell the time, right?
No, of course not. A $5 digital watch or the phone in your pocket tells the time with far greater accuracy.
So what are they actually buying?
When someone buys that luxury watch, they are purchasing the identity of achievement. They are buying social status or perhaps the feeling of belonging to an exclusive club.
So the physical gears and springs are just secondary.
Completely secondary to the social signaling.
But hold on a second. Is this really a uniquely modern problem? I mean, isn't it just fundamental human nature to want to keep up with the tribe so we don't get left behind?
Well, yes and no. It is deeply rooted in our evolutionary psychology, yes.
Like, we've been buying status symbols since we were trading rare seashells.
Sure, we are social primates. Our survival used to literally depend on our standing within the group. Being ostracized meant death in the ancestral environment.
Right. So signaling your value is hardwired.
It is a hardwired instinct, but what makes it a modern problem is the scale and the velocity of the exposure.
Algorithms.
The algorithms, and just the sheer volume of data we process. In a hunter-gatherer tribe, you were comparing yourself to maybe 50 or 100 people.
Yeah.
Today, through social media, you are comparing your behind-the-scenes reality, the laundry on the floor, the burnt toast, the mundane Tuesday mornings, to the highly curated, meticulously edited highlight reels of 8 billion people.
It is such a rigged comparison.
It's completely unfair to your own brain.
Like, you watch one video of a pristine, minimalist designer kitchen, and then the algorithm feeds you 50 more, just like it.
Because interest creates exposure.
Right, and then exposure strengthens interest. Suddenly, you look around your perfectly functional kitchen, the one that cooks your food and keeps you alive, and it feels deeply inadequate.
And that feedback loop actively narrows your reality. When you see a specific lifestyle repeated constantly, your brain categorizes it as the new normal.
It just accepts it as baseline.
Yes. It's the space between seeing and wanting. Look, inspiration is a healthy human drive. Seeing someone else's beautiful kitchen might inspire you to cook more, which is great.
Right. Nothing wrong with a little inspiration.
But the danger arises when inspiration mutates into insecure comparison. When you start asking, am I falling behind my peers? Rather than asking, does a marble countertop actually improve the specific life I want to live?
Man, and this desperation to buy an identity, it doesn't just mess with our self-esteem. It directly dictates how we bleed money on a daily basis.
Oh, heavily. Because we rarely just buy objects anymore. We buy feelings.
We shop to distract ourselves.
Yeah, from workplace stress to soothe anxiety or, to construct a persona.
Okay, I have to admit, I caught myself doing this recently with outdoor gear.
Oh, yeah. What happened?
I was looking at these incredibly expensive professional-grade hiking boots. Like, they were engineered for surviving the tundra.
The really serious ones.
Yes. And I live in a city. I walk on pavement. I don't need tundra boots.
Right. You aren't doing any ice climbing on your lunch break.
Not at all. But in my head, I wasn't buying leather and rubber. I was buying the fantasy of becoming this rugged, outdoorsy, adventurous person who conquers mountains on the weekends.
And that is the core illusion of identity-based consumption. The purchase gives you the temporary dopamine hit of becoming the person you aspire to be without requiring you to do the actual grueling work of climbing the mountain.
Wow. So I just bought the feeling of the accomplishment.
Exactly. You bought a shortcut to the feeling.
That is wild. And where this gets genuinely alarming to me is when we take that exact same consumer mindset, this desire for quick, surface-level validation, and we apply it to our relationships.
Yes. That's when it becomes truly destructive.
Like, we start treating people like hiking boots.
We really do. We confuse the desire for attention with the fundamental human need for connection. And those operate on completely different psychological bandwidths.
How so?
Well, attention is immediate, it's superficial, and it's transactional. It says, notice me.
Okay, Like a notification on your screen.
Exactly. The compliment on an outfit, the quick text back. But connection is deep, complex, and requires vulnerability. It says, know me.
Know me. That's powerful.
It is. It's built on trust, shared history, and mutual effort.
It's totally the difference between compulsively refreshing a feed to see who liked your post versus having a 2-hour quiet coffee with a friend where you talk about something you're actually struggling with.
Yes. The dopamine hit of a like is fast, but it evaporates in seconds.
So if your underlying biological requirement is connection, but you attempt to satisfy it by chasing attention.
You will live in a state of constant emotional starvation.
Jeez, that's heavy.
It is. 100 superficial compliments will never nourish you the way one truly meaningful conversation does. It's like you're eating junk food to cure a nutritional deficiency.
Which bleeds directly into how we view romantic love, too. This confusion between wanting something to enrich our lives versus needing something to survive.
Yes, the distinction between love and emotional dependency is profound.
How do you separate them?
Wanting a partner is a beautiful, generative state. It says, I choose you. I am a complete person on my own, but my life is vastly richer and more interesting with you in it.
That sounds healthy.
It is. But needing a partner, in the strict sense of the word, says, I cannot function without you. You are the structural, load-bearing pillar of my emotional stability.
Wow. Making someone entirely responsible for your emotional baseline is a terrifying amount of pressure to put on another human being.
It really is. It crushes the relationship under its own weight.
I can imagine.
When love morphs into absolute necessity, it stops being love and mutates into fear and control. You try to manage their behavior so they don't leave and disrupt your survival.
That is so toxic.
Yeah.
But you mentioned in the notes that there's a reassuring reality here about our emotional needs.
Yes. The reassuring part is that genuine emotional needs are incredibly flexible.
Meaning they don't have to be satisfied by one specific source.
Correct. If you have a deep human need for belonging and intimacy, it does not mathematically require one specific romantic partner to fulfill it.
Oh, interesting.
It can be satisfied through a close-knit community, deep platonic friendships, chosen family, or shared purpose.
Though we have options.
Exactly. When you realize that your needs have multiple potential avenues for fulfillment, you strip all that desperation out of your desires.
But our brains are just so stubborn. We constantly attach our deepest needs for happiness to these highly specific, rigid outcomes.
We do.
Like we think, if I just get this specific job, or marry this specific person, or buy this specific house, then I will finally be happy.
Welcome to the arrival fallacy.
The arrival fallacy.
Yes. This is the dark side of ambition, and it ties directly back to that thermostat we discussed earlier.
Right, the recalibration.
The arrival fallacy is the cognitive illusion that reaching a future milestone will induce a permanent, lasting state of fulfillment.
It's the belief that crossing a marathon finish line will somehow cure your taxes, fix your bad hair days, and resolve your childhood trauma.
Exactly. But the reality is the finish line just dumps you back into Tuesday morning traffic.
With sore legs.
With very sore legs. And we can track this neurochemically too. The human dopamine system is not designed to reward us for having things.
Wait, it's not.
No. It is designed to reward us for seeking things. Think about it. When our ancestors were hunting a mammoth, dopamine drove the focus and the pursuit.
Okay, that kept them motivated.
Right. But the moment the mammoth is caught, the dopamine drops. If the brain kept rewarding us indefinitely for past successes, we would stop striving, we'd sit around, and eventually we'd starve.
Wow. So the emptiness we feel after hitting a major life goal isn't a malfunction.
Not all.
It is the brain working exactly as intended. It shuts off the reward chemicals to make us hungry again.
Which is precisely why the larger house eventually just becomes more square footage that you have to vacuum.
Oh, yes.
The higher-paying executive job often translates to fewer weekends with your family and elevated cortisol levels.
Right. The milestone changes your external circumstances, but it does not fundamentally rewire your internal emotional baseline.
Exactly.
But then does that mean we should just give up on ambition altogether? Like, if getting what we want just resets the thermostat and leaves us empty, shouldn't we just stop wanting things?
Just sit in a room and stare at the wall.
Yeah, like kill all desire entirely.
Not at all. A life devoid of desire is a life devoid of motion. Desire fuels curiosity, it drives scientific innovation, it sparks art.
Okay, so desire isn't the enemy.
No. The crucial intervention is differentiating between desires that ask us to consume and desires that ask us to create.
Oh, that's an interesting distinction.
Yeah.
How do those differ in practice?
Well, a consumer desire asks, what can I acquire from the world to make me feel better? It is entirely focused on extraction.
Like buying the hiking boots.
Yes.
Yeah.
A creative desire asks, what can I build? What complex skill can I master? How can I contribute?
Okay, I see.
Consumer desires rely on external objects to change how we feel. Creative desires require us to undergo internal growth.
Looking back at the marathon analogy, the true enduring value wasn't the piece of metal they hung around your neck at the end.
No, it's just a piece of metal.
Right. The value was the person you had to become, the discipline, the resilience, the early mornings to be capable of running 26 miles.
Exactly. The journey forces the growth, even if you trip and never actually cross the destination line.
Okay, so the question then becomes, how do we hold on to that creative ambition without letting the arrival fallacy dictate our happiness?
The most effective counterweight to relentless ambition is the active practice of gratitude.
Gratitude. Okay, but I feel like people often assume that if they become content with their current lives, they will just lose their edge.
Right. They fear gratitude breeds complacency.
Yeah, exactly.
But they are completely different cognitive muscles. Gratitude is the recognition of what is good in the present moment. Ambition is the recognition of what is possible in the future.
So they aren't mutually exclusive.
Not at all. They can operate simultaneously. You can feel deep, profound appreciation for your small apartment, recognizing that it keeps you warm and safe, while simultaneously drafting blueprints to build a larger house.
I love that. So to balance that equation, we really have to establish what enough actually looks like for us individually.
Yes.
And then we need practical cognitive tools to defend that definition from a world that wants us to keep wanting.
Defining enough is honestly the most radical concept in modern psychology, and it is highly subjective. Your definition of enough will look entirely different from mine.
And it doesn't just mean giving everything up, right?
No, defining enough is not about forced deprivation or embracing poverty. Simplicity is about clarity.
Clarity of what?
It is the process of identifying what genuinely brings you joy and meaning and ruthlessly cutting away the excess that distracts from it.
It requires a total redefinition of wealth then, because we are hammered with the idea that wealth is strictly a metric of financial accumulation.
We are constantly. But true wealth is autonomy.
Autonomy.
Yes. It's your time. It's your peace of mind. It's having the margin in your day to sit on the porch and do absolutely nothing.
Which feels like a luxury these days.
Because it is. If you possess millions in the bank but have zero control over your daily schedule and your stress levels are eroding your cardiovascular health, you are heavily impoverished in the metrics that actually sustain human life.
That is such a good point. Yeah. So to defend your time and your resources, you have to introduce cognitive friction into your decision-making.
Yes. And the most accessible tool for this is the power of the pause.
The 24-hour rule. Because right now, the current environment is engineered to be entirely frictionless, isn't it?
Oh, completely frictionless. You see a product on social media, you double tap, your credit card is preloaded, and it arrives at your door the next day.
There is zero space between impulse and execution.
None. So the pause acts as a circuit breaker. By mandating a 24-hour waiting period between seeing an item and purchasing it, you force the brain to move out of the highly reactive dopamine-driven limbic system and into the prefrontal cortex where actual rational evaluation happens.
And does that actually work?
More often than not, after 24 hours, the emotional urgency just evaporates. You realize it was a fleeting impulse triggered by an algorithm, not a genuine desire.
And when you're in that 24-hour window, you can apply what the notes call the replacement question.
Right.
Which is all about confronting opportunity costs. Whenever you are about to spend a significant amount of money or even commit a significant amount of time, you ask, what am I giving up in exchange for this?
Our brains are terrible at instinctively calculating opportunity costs. We view a purchase in isolation.
Like doesn't affect anything else.
Exactly. But if you buy a $1,000 phone upgrade that you don't strictly need, you aren't just losing $1,000.
Right.
You are trading away the weekend getaway that money could have funded, or the compound interest it could have generated, or just the psychological breathing room of having it in an emergency fund.
You make the invisible cost visible.
Yes.
And if that doesn't clarify things, there's the ultimate question, which honestly cuts right to the bone. You ask, what would actually happen if I didn't have this?
And we don't mean, would I be slightly bummed out? We mean, what would be the literal material consequence?
Like, would your physical health decline?
Right. Would you lose your ability to earn a living? Would your close relationships suffer?
Or would your life simply be marginally less convenient for a few days until your brain's thermostat recalibrated to the new normal?
Exactly. And usually the answer is that nothing of substance would happen at all.
And recognizing that gives you such incredible leverage. The ultimate flex isn't buying everything you can afford. The flex is having the freedom to say, I could, but I don't need to.
Being intentional isn't about walking around saying no to everything and living like a monk.
Right.
It's about owning your desires instead of letting your desires own you.
That is the crucial distinction right there. We cannot and should not eliminate desire. We just need to stop treating every passing desire as a mandatory instruction.
Perfectly said. Wanting something does not obligate you to purchase it, to chase it, or to let it dictate your self-worth.
You can just notice it.
Yes.
Yeah.
You can simply notice the desire arise, acknowledge it with a little curiosity, and consciously choose to let it pass.
Well, we have covered a lot of ground today. We've mapped out the incredibly blurry lines between the biological needs that keep us alive and the endless desires manufactured by our culture.
It's a lot to think about.
It is. We've looked at how our internal thermostats are constantly being recalibrated by algorithms, turning luxuries into perceived necessities, and we've unpacked how to use the pause to insert friction back into our choices.
Protecting our wallets, our ambitions, and our relationships.
Exactly. The core takeaway for you is this. Your needs sustain you, your desires enrich you, but neither should be allowed to run on autopilot.
I want to leave you with a final thought to consider, building on this idea of our environment.
Okay, let's hear it.
We discussed how algorithms shape your desires through repeated exposure. But remember that you voluntarily enter these digital environments every single day.
That's true.
If your brain's thermostat is calibrated by what you look at, what kind of desires are you actively programming into your own nervous system every time you open an app?
Wow.
Are you feeding your brain a curated reality that guarantees you will constantly feel inadequate? Or are you curating an environment that helps you recognize when you finally have enough?
The architecture of your desires is ultimately in your hands.
It really is.
Such a vital question to ask ourselves. The next time you feel that sudden, desperate urge for a new phone, or you notice that business class seat starting to feel like a baseline necessity, take a breath.
Yeah.
Engage the pause.
It changes everything.
It really does. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Stay curious, choose consciously, and we'll see you next time.